If someone had told me a month ago that I'd find myself in this situation, I would have laughed. I always thought my marriage to Jonathan was strong, even if it wasn't perfect. We were different, but we knew how to compromise. Or so I believed. It all started with a letter, a real paper letter with a stamp and someone else's handwriting. I found it tucked between a stack of Jonathan's old books while I was organizing his library. The letter was addressed to him, dated 5 years ago. I hadn't planned to read someone else's mail, but something about it caught my attention. Maybe it was intuition, maybe just curiosity. I opened the envelope and saw neat lines of writing. Dear Jonathan, I still remember that night in Boston. You said you'd never forget me? Sometimes I think we could have been happy together if not for your wife. I read those words over and over. I couldn't wrap my head around it. My Jonathan, the man who always seemed the embodiment of honesty, had an affair. 5 years ago, when I was going through a tough time at work and he was supporting me, he was with another woman. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say a word to him. But something inside me broke. I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. Questions spun in my mind. Who was she? Why did he do it? Did he ever really love me? A week after finding the letter, I traveled to New York for an architecture conference. It was an important trip for me, a chance to present my new project. But all I could think about was the letter and Jonathan. On the first night, there was a gala dinner. I felt out of place, forcing myself to smile and make small talk. At some point, I slipped out onto the terrace to get some air and clear my head. That's where I met him. He was standing by the railing, smoking a cigar and gazing out at the city lights. Tall, with an intense look and a slight, knowing smile. He introduced himself. Kane. My name's Kane. We started talking. It turned out he was an architect too, but he worked in a different field, designing interiors for luxury hotels. Kane was charming and witty, and what surprised me most was that he didn't try to impress me. He was just himself. We talked for hours, forgetting about the dinner and the conference. Kane told me about his projects, his travels, his life in New York. I listened, feeling the tension of the past days slowly melt away. At one point, Kane asked, "Is something wrong? You have sad eyes." I don't know why I trusted him. Maybe because he was a stranger and it was easier to pour my heart out. Maybe because I was just tired of holding everything in. I told him about the letter, about Jonathan, about my doubts and my hurt. Kane listened quietly, not interrupting or judging. When I finished, he said, "You know, Emily, sometimes you just have to let yourself be happy. You can't live in the past." His words stuck with me. I looked at him and saw understanding and kindness in his eyes. That night, we walked through New York for hours, holding hands like old friends. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel bed feeling a little guilty, but also lighter and freer. Kane had helped me see things differently. He didn't offer solutions. He just gave me space to feel alive again. The conference went on, but I couldn't focus on work. I kept thinking about Kane. We met every evening, wandering the city, talking about everything and nothing. I realized I was falling for him. On my last night in New York, Kane took me to his favorite jazz club. We sat at a small table, listening to music and sipping wine. At some point, Kane took my hand and said, "Emily, I don't want you to leave." I looked at him and realized I didn't want to leave either. I wanted to stay in New York with Kane and start a new life. But I knew that wasn't possible. I had Jonathan, a home, a job. I couldn't just walk away from everything. That night, I made a decision that changed my life. I barely slept. Kane's words, his gaze, his hand in mine, they all replayed in my mind. I tried to imagine what life could be if I let myself stay. But reality was waiting. In the morning, I had a flight back to Chicago, and at home, Jonathan, who still didn't know about the letter. Right before my flight, Kane sent me a short message. "If you ever decide you want to be happy, just call. I'll be waiting." I came home a different person. On the surface, everything was the same. Jonathan greeted me with his usual smile, asked about the conference, told me about his students. But now there was an invisible wall between us. I looked at him and wondered, does he know that I know? Can he sense that I've changed? I tried to live as before, but I couldn't. The letter haunted me. I found myself comparing Jonathan and Kane, my life before and after. I started staying late at work just to avoid coming home too early. Sometimes I thought Jonathan suspected something, but he never asked. One evening, while sorting through old photos, I came across the letter again. I read it, and suddenly it hit me. I didn't want to live in the shadow of someone else's secrets anymore. I wanted to be honest, at least with myself. I called Kane. My heart pounded as I heard his voice. We were both silent for a long time, and then I said, I don't know what happens next, but I want to try. I'm tired of pretending. That same evening, I told Jonathan about the letter. I didn't accuse him, didn't shout, I just said I knew. He was silent for a long time, then admitted it had been a mistake, that he'd regretted it for years. I listened and realized I wasn't angry. I just couldn't be the same person anymore. A week later, I met Kane again. We walked through autumnal New York holding hands, and I realized sometimes to find yourself, you have to lose everything else.